Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips. A couple things before I start on topics, which will be coronavirus. That's what everybody wants to talk about right now, and you guys have a lot of great questions I want to answer. The comments continue to be disabled on YouTube because YouTube isn't fixing it. There's nobody to talk to, so we don't have any choice, but you are welcome to email me at pampopper@msn.com with questions or comments. And in fact, some of your questions and comments are going to be the things I talk about this week, both on Tuesday and on Thursday. Upcoming classes, Cancer 201, where we are quantifying some of the alternative treatments that you are most curious about. So an example would be medicinal mushrooms. Take them, not take them, what kind of cancer would they be helpful for, adjuvant primary treatment, how much do you need, where should you get it, and that sort of thing. But not just mushrooms, lots and lots of topics like that. We have one more call for those of you interested in professional development on April 6th at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's Monday, next Monday, and you're welcome to join us free of charge. We can talk about some of the career opportunities that are available in our field. And I've had several requests since a lot of people have had more time on their hands and also are feeling a lot more pressure to change careers. I've had a lot of people ask about doing an accelerated program to finish earlier, not by cutting out pieces of the curriculum, that's not the point, but by accelerating the time frame where we have classes more frequently, shorter distance between classes to complete homework assignments and that sort of thing. So if you think you'd like to be doing something like what we do here by the end of August, we are going to make that opportunity available. So let me know about it. A couple of other things we've added are virtual yoga and virtual workouts. And we also have a high school health class for homeschooled children that probably shouldn't call them children, homeschooled adolescents, high school and middle school, that will be live through Zoom. And we're going to do more classes over the next several months for kids who are learning from home. And we think more of them are going to just continue to do it after this crisis is over. And then, of course, I posted summer semester online for the Institute, which includes a class in employer health and institutional food. So if you have some interest in working in those fields, that might be a class that you would like to sign up for. So virtual yoga, virtual workouts, homeschool health class for middle and high school students, summer semester with an employer health class, careers in our field, and lots of good stuff to talk about. And of course, comments are welcome, pampopper@msn.com. All right, so let's talk about coronavirus and last week's video and that sort of thing. So I want to first of all thank many of you for sending very thoughtful responses to last Tuesday's video and for many of the supporting comments that you made. When you're being hit from all sides of an issue, it's nice once in a while to hear from a fan, and I appreciate that. Some of you were able to disagree or question some things without being disagreeable. In other words, when I say thoughtful responses, I don't mean just people who agree with me, but people who put a lot of thought into what they have to say and might disagree with me on something or ask me to clarify something. I'm going to do some of that right here. And I thank you for that. I don't mind dialogue, and I don't mind somebody questioning me. I think that discourse is what we should have more of in this country, not less. Now, normally I try to vary up the content. If you've been watching for a while, you know that every week different topics, and I think we'll return to that fairly soon, but because this is such a hot topic, I just think it's really important to pay a little more attention to it. And many of you asked questions that were too much for me to type, and also that I thought other people would be interested in. So I just decided to allocate this week's video clips to comments in response to things that you emailed me. Now, the first thing is I had a couple of questions from new viewers who asked things such as that last Tuesday's video did not cover several issues related to the coronavirus. Well, last week's video was not designed to cover all of the issues, and I don't think you could do it in one short video. As it was, that video was almost 25 minutes long, almost 2 times the average length of the videos that I do. And I could talk about the topic for hours. I had all I could do to squeeze the material I had found into a 2.5-hour workshop. It could have just as easily been a couple of days. So these video clips are really not meant to be the whole story about everything. If I talk about vitamin B12, for example, somebody could ask, well, what about the rest of the vitamins? Why don't you talk about them? You know, what do you think about vitamins? Good, bad, do you take them? Well, you know, over time I might cover all of those things, but in one video clip I'm not going to try to do that. In fact, we have an entire course on dietary supplements that covers that, and you could never condense it down into a 10 or 15-minute video. Another person wrote that he could not tell whether or not I was against all vaccines or just some of them. And for the record, I really try to stay not for or against anything other than looking at evidence and helping people make their own mind up about what they think about this. I really stay away from telling people what to do. I mean, I have opinions about things, but I don't think that that's the business that we're in here, is to give you opinions. I think it's really to let people decide what they think about this, all these issues. So I've written 350 pages of referenced articles on this topic. I've created a whole course with dozens of videos. I don't think I could cover all that here. And again, for the record, not for, not against, just really putting out information and data. For those of you who didn't learn as much as you wanted to from the video and had questions, I would just suggest that you watch more videos. I've posted like 1,000 of them on this channel. And remember that reporters write and report little snippets of things for 5 or 10 minutes, and it's not the whole story. You know, a story about a fire is not a story about all fires and risks of fires and that sort of thing. So I'll do my best to cover small topics thoroughly, but again, limitations here are these are video clips, not video courses. Okay, so I hope that clarifies a little bit. All right, so let's get to some specific coronavirus questions. Isn't it true that the virus spreads faster than others? And what about the R0 number? Well, let's talk about R0 for a minute. It's a mathematical term that indicates how contagious an infectious disease is. It's also referred to as the reproduction number. As an infection spreads to new people, it reproduces itself. R0 tells you the average number of people who will catch a disease from one contagious person, and it specifically applies to a population of people who were previously free of infection and haven't been vaccinated. So if a disease has an R0 of 18, this means that an infected person will transmit it to an average of 18 other people, as long as nobody's been vaccinated against it or is already immune to it in the community. Now, in the case of the coronavirus, I've said that the R0 number is irrelevant, and there are a couple of reasons why I say this. I was able to find on the CDC's website the instruction booklet for how to administer the coronavirus test. There are 2 paragraphs that clearly state that the test is inaccurate. People can test positive and not have coronavirus because if they have related colds, flu viruses, exposure to other viruses, those could interfere with the accuracy of the test. And conversely, a negative test doesn't mean that the person doesn't have it, which makes one wonder, what are we doing spending all this money on all this testing? Another reason is that considerable amounts of testing in other areas has shown that the virus does indeed spread very quickly, but it's far less deadly than we were told. And the reason I say that is a significant percentage of those tests that were positive were people who were completely asymptomatic. Remember, we were testing whole populations of people on cruise ships and in certain areas in Asia and that sort of thing. So this means that what really is going on is that if we left everybody alone, this thing would spread like wildfire. And like so many other viruses and that sort of thing, you develop immunity through that spread of the virus. And you would, but we never hear about this kind of thing when seasonal flu spreads, for example, and it's different strains every year. It also means that the death rate is probably considerably lower, as is the severity rate, because we literally most likely have tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people all over the planet who contracted this virus, never had a symptom, their immune system cleared it, and they're wandering around giving it to others. Now, some of you say, oh my gosh, that's frightening. But I mentioned last week how important it is to differentiate between somebody catching a bug and somebody ending up hospitalized or disabled or dead from the bug. All right, we have to really make sure that those are 2 distinct things. Worry about the severe cases and the people dying. Me catching a cold or a virus doesn't make much difference. I'm healthy, I get rid of it pretty quickly when I get sick, which isn't often. So bottom line is, we don't know what the R0 number is. We have absolutely no idea. We're using an irrelevant, inaccurate test here in the States. In other areas where better tests have been used, we find lots of asymptomatic people who test positive. So we just don't know, and that's why I don't think it's something we should spend a lot of time on. Now here's another question. But I hear that the COVID-19 patients are requiring more care. Actually, they aren't. The statistics are very clear. The people who are suffering most and require intervention, other than just waiting for this to pass, because most people clear colds and the flu on their own without any intervention, are people who are not healthy. So you take a person who is overweight, taking multiple medications, and has several comorbidities. This is a precarious person, and sometimes the tipping point is catching a virus or a cold or something of that nature when you're already in a compromised position. And this is the case not only with the elderly, but also with children. And the stories that are told about children are frightening the heck out of parents. So let me give you an example. A child with autoimmune disease and chronic infections and who takes immunosuppressant drugs for the autoimmune disease is already very ill and has a compromised immune system. This child is most likely to develop, more likely I should say, to develop many different health issues. But when reporting a severe case or a child who dies, the accompanying information that would put context to what happened is often always actually missing. What you hear is, oh my God, a 3-month-old died, or oh my God, a 6-year-old died. It's if the child's pre-existing conditions made that child very, very vulnerable to having something bad happen, I think that's good to know. Now, it's hard for me to fathom the reason for not disclosing all of that information, since one would think that part of the goal of the health authorities would be to A, tell the truth and reassure the public, not necessarily increase panic. I mean, I don't think if you were to call and survey public officials, they would tell you that panicked people are a good thing to have. So this is another reason I'm questioning this whole thing and asking a lot of questions and a lot of things that just don't add up. Telling the whole truth would go a long way in making people not feel panic. So every parent with a 3-year-old out there or a baby doesn't need to think, oh my gosh, my kid is next. That's not the case necessarily. Now, another question, but the healthcare system is overwhelmed with the virus. It must be serious. Well, if you're getting your information from the news, this is the story you're hearing. And it's made to sound like the overwhelm is due to the virus, and it is sort of, but not in the way that you're thinking. I've taken the time to contact people who are on the front lines in healthcare, working in hospitals and emergency rooms, and I've spoken to them personally. The problem that they are reporting to me is that the panic incited by the government and the news is sending everybody who has a sniffle to the emergency room, or everybody who has a family member with a sniffle to the emergency room or some kind of local facility for testing and medical attention. The number of actual diagnoses remains low, comparatively speaking. And part of the problem is that these numbers are not reported in context. And when you scream at me, you're not looking at them in context either. And I'll come back to that on Thursday. So please watch my video clip on Thursday as well. But the hysteria is causing the healthcare system to fall apart, and more people are seeking medical attention who don't need it. Remember, I'm going to go back to this. The flu, seasonal flu, affects tens of millions of people in the United States every year. And the CDC estimates the death rate will end up at about 55,000 for the season. And I don't mean to be dismissive, but please explain to me why the hospitals weren't overwhelmed then. Why is 54,453 cases as of yesterday overwhelming the system and tens of millions were not earlier this year? Because no one was inciting panic then. Now, in terms of overwhelming the system, I thought what would be interesting to do is to contact the American Hospital Association and get some data from them. So here goes. There are 924,107 beds in 6,146 hospitals in the United States. According to the American Hospital Association, the vacancy rate is held steady at about 34% for the last several years, which means that at any given time we should have 314,196 empty beds, and that means that there are 5.77 rooms for each coronavirus case in the United States, provided they all needed inpatient care, which they clearly do not. So here's where we are. We're using a test that's inaccurate by the CDC's own admission, ginning up meaningless cases and panic. And while that's going on, people who really need health care are suffering terribly. We have members right now who have cancer and serious health issues. They were scheduled for surgery that they desperately needed, which has all been put aside so we can deal with this ginned up nonsense. Some very prominent doctors who are taken a whole lot more seriously by health officials and others than I am are starting to talk about this and write about the same thing, and I'll talk about them on Thursday. But they're warning that if this nonsense does not stop, and they're starting to refer to it almost in those terms, we're really going to see some carnage. And it's not going to be from the coronavirus. It's going to be from people who are really sick and need health care, and they're not getting it while we're focusing on everything else. Last thing I'll cover here, and then I'm going to pick it up on Thursday and talk about more issues. And you're probably figuring out why I didn't type all this out for each of you who asked a question, right? What strategies do you recommend? For example, is to shelter at home a good idea? Well, one of the things I found very interesting, I was able to locate a video that was filmed in 2009 in which Fauci, the guy who wants to shut the whole country down and who gins up fear every day on television, was actually asked about these issues during the H1N1 swine flu fiasco. Now, this flu infected 65 million people, and according to Fauci, there were 13,000 deaths in the United States. Okay, so we have 1,000 and some deaths today. So just put this all in perspective. We have 493 cases as of 493,000 cases as of this morning. So when we have 65 million people infected worldwide, he says that quarantines have no impact. He was specifically asked about people gathering in bars and restaurants, and he said that that was not any kind of problem either. In 4 months, the coronavirus has infected, less than 500,000 people. We're shutting down the world. And again, I'm pointing out the inconsistency. There's no way you can reconcile hysteria based on these numbers versus the response that has happened in the past with numbers that were far worse. So I will continue to ask the hard questions because somebody needs to be asking them. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that other people are asking these questions too. And so I think that in the near future, we're going to see a much different approach to this coronavirus. And I'm pretty sure the truth is going to come out about what is really going on. So as usual, hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel and you'd like to hear more videos and be notified when they're posted. Pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I'll be back to you on Thursday with more news.